is LBC. From Global, leading Britain's conversation. Cross Question with Iain Dale.
Hello and welcome to Wednesday's Cross Question. I'm Iain Dale. Over the next hour, we'll be taking calls from you on 0345 6060 973, so you can put your questions directly to our panel. With me tonight are Dean Russell, the Conservative MP for Watford. When I say he's with me, he's actually on Zoom. Oz Katerji is Middle East conflict journalist. Jonathan Liss is a political commentator. And Annabel Denham is from the Institute of Economic Affairs. If you'd like to watch us, you can do so on the Global Player, on the LBC YouTube channel, Facebook feed and the website at lbc.co.uk.
Call 0345 6060 973. Tweet at LBC. Text 84850. Cross Question with Iain Dale. This is LBC.
Right, a very timely question to start off with. Welcome to you all. Let's go to Anthony in Staines. Hello, Anthony.
Hi, Ian. Hi, everyone. Are we heading for one of the most nail-biting couple of by-elections in decades?
Well, there are possibly two by-elections coming up. There's definitely one following the sad death of James Brokenshire. That will be in Old Bexley and Sidcup, Ted Heath's old seat. And, of course, today with the news that Claudia Webb has been found guilty of harassment. Is it harassment or harassment, Jonathan? I'm useless. I keep
harassment.
Yeah, well, anyway, doesn't really matter, does it? So she's been found guilty. Now, if she's handed down a custodial sentence of more than 12 months, there would be an automatic by-election. If it's less than 12 months, then there would be a recall petition in her constituency, which I imagine would probably be successful. Now, that seat, it has been a relatively safe Labour seat. Keith Vaz held the seat before her. I'll actually look up the majority in a moment. I think it's around 6,000. So that could be quite an interesting one. Dean, let's go to you first. By-elections sometimes can be incredibly exciting, and other times they just sort of aren't. Why are some by-elections exciting and others not?
Well, first of all, can I just pay tribute to James? He was a really genuinely wonderful man, and it's heartbreaking to know we won't see him in Parliament again. To answer your question in terms of by-elections, I think because they're a focus point, so it's for the whole nation to look at how seats will swing, what the electorate's going to do, how they're going to come out. And so from a party perspective, you want to throw all of your effort at it. And I think with any by-election, as these come up, it's an opportunity to reset out the stall, that you've been working on as a party, as a government in our case, and really sort of go for it. I personally love campaigning. I love elections and I love being out knocking on doors. And I think what's really powerful with them is that you really do get to hear what people are really thinking mid-term on the doorstep. And I think they're actually very powerful things, but it's incredibly, incredibly sad that we're going to have to no doubt do one soon for James's constituency, because he's sorely missed.
And what do you make of this verdict today on Claudia Webb? She says she's going to appeal it, but from what the judge said, good luck with that. Do you think she should stand down immediately? Because this is one of those occasions when if it's somebody from the other party, you want them to stand down immediately. But if it's someone from your own party, often you say, I think we need to let the process take its course.
You know what? I'm one of those politicians, an odd politician in the sense that I don't like calling for people to leave their post, and I'm not one to quickly jump to resignation requests. However, I think in this one it's a bit of a different case. There's been a court case. I don't know what the appeal will be, but it seems pretty cut and dry. And I think for anyone who's an electorate in her patch, in her constituency, I doubt they're going to be wanting to go out and put a cross next to her name during the next election. So it is, of course, up to her to make a decision on that. But I think actually this is one of those rare occasions where I would say I think it's probably the right thing to resign. But usually I say let the electorate decide, and we'll see what comes. But with this one, I think she should really have a serious think about her position.
Jonathan Liss, the Labour Party have called for her to quit. She's actually sitting as an independent MP at the moment because her parliamentary membership was suspended. This is quite a difficult one, isn't it? Because she was kind of parachuted in at the last minute before the last election. I think she was an Islington councillor. There was lots of ill feeling in the local Labour Party in Leicester. It's quite a tricky one for Labour, this.
I don't think it's that tricky, to be honest. I mean, they've they've said that she should resign. So they've made their views plain. She's been convicted of a criminal offence. It's now in her gift. Obviously, parties can't force people out of the Commons once they've been elected in their own right. She's had the whip suspended, so I don't think it's problematic for Labour. I don't think it reflects badly on the party. It would if they kind of kept her in the fold. But, I said also, when Fiona Onasanya, a former Labour MP, was convicted of an offence, it's up to her to decide what to do. But while she's an MP, she is allowed to be an MP. I remember there were a lot of complaints about her participating in Brexit votes, for example. And I wrote an article saying, it's completely legitimate for her to do that. And I say the same thing with Claudia Webb. We have a process in this country. If she is jailed and there is a recall petition and enough of her constituents want her to be recalled, then that should be followed. And I don't really have anything more to say about that. It's a matter for her ultimately.
Do you think that seat would be in danger? Do you think that the Conservatives could lose Old Bexley and Sidcup? And that would be an earthquake, wouldn't it?
I mean, I wouldn't have thought that Old Bexley and Sidcup was...
Well, then we wouldn't have thought Cheshire Management...
That's exactly what I was... You took the words out of my mouth here, not for the first time. So with Cheshire and Amersham, that was never seen as a remotely unsafe proposition. So who knows? Old Bexley and Sidcup does fall within the so-called blue wall, with more sort of socially liberal Tories who might be aghast at the kind of the culture war, nativist rhetoric that's been coming. I think it was a Remain seat as well. I'm not 100% sure, but I think it was. And so that could be interesting, but I'm pretty sure that will stay Tory and the Leicester will stay Labour.
Annabel, what do you think of the system here, particularly with Claudia Webb? Do you think that this idea that if she gets more than 12 months, she is automatically expelled from the Commons, but under that there has to be a recall petition? Do you think that's the right way to handle these things?
Well, in my view, it's not really harsh enough. I think it should probably be easier to eject politicians from power. I think Jonathan's right. The Labour Party have done all they can to preserve their reputation here. They've taken decisive action. They've distanced themselves from this unpleasant situation. And I think Claudia's position is quite obviously untenable. She ought to stand down. Obviously, questions were raised over her competence a couple of months ago in that now infamous Foreign Affairs Select Committee incident, but things have really gone from... Just explain
what happened.
Oh, well, she mispronounced Belarus when questioning Dominic Raab.
Yeah, I think it was worse than that, wasn't it? So he couldn't make head nor tail of what she was asking.
She was asking about intervention, but couldn't really explain why she thought such intervention was necessary. She certainly looked quite confused at the time, but things have gone from bad to much, much worse for Claudia Webb. So I think she ought to stand down. It's the right thing to do, and allow her political career to end in failure, as so many do.
Oz Katerji.
Yeah, so I think one of the more interesting things is not what it means for Labour, because what it means for Labour was made pretty clear when she lost the whip very quickly. I think it's more what it means for the Socialist campaign group of MPs. Both Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell spoke in her defence at the trial before she was convicted. And as far as I understand, she remains a member of the Socialist campaign group of MPs. So, for Labour, there's nothing to do with them, but the Socialist campaign group of MPs, who are not all Labour MPs, given that they have two independents among them, they're in an awkward situation of whether they choose to stick or twist. And I've seen no indication that they're... I mean, it's just happened, so maybe it's happened while I've been on air, but I've seen no indication that they are not going to continue to stand by her. So I think it's really embarrassing for the sort of Corbynite movement in this country that she was a recognisable Corbynite MP, one of the new intake. And she was also the head of the disputes panel during some really serious Labour anti-Semitism cases. So I think it says a lot about the state of what the party was, but I don't think it says anything about what the state of what the party is today, which is not Claudia Webb's party, should we say.
Right, let's move on. 0345 6060 973 if you'd like to send in your question to our panel. Tina is in Battersea and she sent in a text saying, should we be stockpiling for Christmas? Is it just scaremongering? Jonathan, are you buying toys for your nieces, nephews already? You like me, leave it till the 23rd of December anyway.
Well, as a Jewish person, I don't actually buy Christmas presents.
Good answer. Okay, we'll leave you out of this.
Look, it's quite simple on this. I don't think we need to listen to political commentators about whether there'll be shortages of Christmas. I'll listen to people who are actually involved in supply chains, and they say there will be. So it's not a party political point or a Brexit Remain point to say there could be shortages. That is literally what people are saying who are responsible for delivering goods to shops. And they say that because of, obviously partly because of COVID, exacerbated massively by Brexit and the N2 and the shortages. Well, it's literally a Brexit question.
No, it's not a Brexit question at all, because Joe Biden today has said there will be shortages in America as well. Are you attributing that to Brexit?
Ian, the point is that there may be worldwide shortages, or the shortages in different polities. It doesn't mean they're always for the same reasons. In the same way, that because some bad thing has happened in America, it doesn't mean that the same things are causing a bad thing in Britain.
How does toys coming in from China? How does Brexit affect that?
Well, look, I think a better comparison would be
answer that question.
Well, obviously, it requires... Well, it might not, if you're going straight from China to Felixstowe, which, by the way, is also clogged at the moment, partly because there aren't... It's not just HGV drivers. Also, these ports employed a lot of people from the EU. Many of whom have gone home. So it's not just... It's about workers in the supply chain. It's not just HGV drivers, coming from the EU. And so, you'd have to look at, are there going to be Christmas shortages in France and Germany, for example? If there are, then maybe you can say fine. So maybe Brexit isn't such a big issue here, but that remains to be seen.
Germany is already facing.
We had someone from the Chamber of Shipping on earlier who said that the ports of Rotterdam and Antwerp, they're also having some of these problems. So look, I'm not suggesting that Brexit has nothing to do with anything.
I'm not saying it's. I'm not saying Brexit is everything either.
You just said it's a Brexit question.
I'm saying it's partly. When I mentioned Brexit and you said not Brexit, I said it's partly Brexit because obviously it's COVID. It's also Brexit.
Right. I just love winding you up, Annabel.
Well, like you say, Ian, they're now talking about having no turkeys for Thanksgiving in the US, which never joined the EU, and they have major supply issues in Germany that never left the EU. So I simply don't buy the argument that this is down to Brexit. It's quite obviously a consequence of the coronavirus pandemic.
But Germany isn't having petrol stations shutting, is it?
Well, I don't personally believe that there was ever a crisis there. I think it was the media's own making. And the question was, should we be stockpiling for Christmas, or is it just scaremongering? I think the problem is in this case, we're going to massively exacerbate the situation by going out and panic buying, just as we did with loo roll at the start of the coronavirus pandemic, and just as we did more recently with petrol. So I'm quite sceptical of the argument that it is because of Brexit. I think it's down to the coronavirus pandemic, the fact that we've rebounded more quickly, which is a good thing, than many were anticipating. And
from a lower base.
Yes, from a low base, undoubtedly. But when GDP is nearly back to where it was pre-pandemic, and that's certainly quite encouraging if you compare it to some of the OBR forecasts that we had earlier this year. So I think things are certainly moving in the right direction. Of course, COVID has exposed the fragility in some of our supply chains and the downside, arguably, to this global interconnectedness. But in many areas, they've remained quite resilient. So I think we are going to have shortages in the coming months. I think it's inevitable. I don't think it's down to Brexit, or if it is, then it's a very small part of the problem that we're facing.
Sorry, can I just ask you, do you not accept that there is a shortage of HGV drivers in this country? I mean, that sort of 10,000, or more, in fact, HGV drivers from the EU have, they're no longer here, and there must be reasons for that.
Well, yes, but a lot of people weren't able to come to the UK over the course of the coronavirus pandemic due to lockdowns, not down to Brexit. I'm not saying there won't be consequences of free movement. I happen to think that it was a great shame that we lost free movement of people when we left the EU, but not just economically speaking, but also in terms of social integration. However, we've now got a backlog of about 50,000 applications for HGV licences. If the DVLA was able to clear that, that would offer part of the solution to this problem. But I think when it comes to lorry drivers, the problem is that the barriers are quite high. It's expensive, takes quite a long time to train, and it's not a lifestyle that would appeal to everyone. So I think this problem was coming down the line.
It'd be quite nice if there were some female HGV drivers, but if you've ever been to some lorry parks in this country, you probably many women wouldn't even consider setting foot in them. Oz?
Yeah, I have to, come out with this. I was a full-blown Remainer, but I think a lot of people who supported Brexit feel very defensive over. Look, we've all accepted Brexit has happened. It's long gone. No one is thinking that we can undo all of that. But it's fair to say, just the facts are we've got a labour shortage, not just an HGV driver shortage. We've got a labour shortage in this country, and that was down to freedom of movement. It's not a Brexit question. It's a free movement of people question. Can we get the labour that we need into this country? It's clear that under the current system that we've got, no, we can't, and we are dealing with the shortages of that. And it's not a Brexit question because we could have had a form of Brexit that allowed it. It's a question of what this government's priorities are, and what this government's priorities are clearly, if you're Priti Patel, immigration above everything seems to be the biggest, ideological priority for this government, even if that means shortages, supplies, whatever, as long as we have got all our chickens in order, with the policies towards stopping immigration.
What do you make of the fact that this week it was announced that we've got the highest ever job vacancies, 1.1 million? Yeah. So there are lots of jobs to go around. But normally we would be thinking it's good that there are so many vacancies. But
we didn't have a massive unemployment. We didn't have a massive unemployment crisis, before. But we want people saying loads of people are out there, can't get work. The problem is people are working, and the money that they're earning from that work is not enough to sustain their lives in some. That's a bigger problem. And it's a bigger problem for a Conservative government that can't deal with businesses paying their people adequately. I'm sorry, we have these polls about people's faith in the politicians to deal with the economy. How does anyone look at what's happening today, right now, with wage stagnation, with labour supply, with shortages, and say the government, the current Conservative government, know what they're doing with the economy and they can be trusted with it? I don't think so.
Well, we have a Conservative politician on the panel. Maybe Dean can explain to us.
Well, for starters, I think a lot of this is very much down to the global supply chain, and we can definitely cover that. But what I would say, I've got a personal view on this. So my dad was a HGV driver, and when I was younger and I was a kid, and every summer I'd go out in the HGV in the lorry with him, and we'd have a great time, and it was a really noble job. And then as time went on, and when he was coming to retirement, I could see that him and his friends and colleagues were worried that if they were late for a delivery or a drop-off, that there'd be someone that could replace them very easily from the EU. And I felt always that actually people from the EU were in many ways actually exploited to be paid less to work in the UK. It meant that being a HGV driver, which was an incredibly tough job, my dad would get up at 3-4 in the morning. He'd have a very long shift. He'd be driving from one place to the next, not with GPS back in those days, having to look where he's going, plan out his route, get to a drop, take the pallets off the back, do all the dockets, all of that stuff. And then over time, it became a cheapened job, and the wages stagnated. They got lower. It was seen as a replaceable job. And what did that mean? That meant over the early 2000s, and in the mid 2000s, what you ended up with was people not wanting to go into that profession. And that led to British workers not becoming lorry drivers, more EU workers coming over, being paid less than they should be. And it meant that the quality of life went down, and it became an interchangeable job. And what we've seen over the past 18 months with the pandemic has been several things. One is that there haven't been those lessons, and definitely not the tests. So you haven't had the workforce repleted, as it were. You haven't had more lorry drivers come forward, but the wages stayed low. And what you've seen over the past few months is wages have increased. People have realised that HGV drivers are it's an important job. It keeps the country going, and actually people should be paid well, and the facilities shouldn't be going into a bush to relieve oneself on a shift. So actually, I think we're coming out of this now. The visa programme actually is an important one, because it means that when we have got shortages in certain types of jobs, we can do visas for it, help people come over to support us while still ensuring British workers are able to skill up and go into those jobs. But also it means at the moment, once the DVL gets moving through the tests, actually we will have a workforce that's fit and able and actually paid well. And when we go to the shortages globally, Poland's got something like 120,000, 130,000 shortage of HGV drivers. So this isn't just a UK thing at all, but I do think it's absolutely right that HGV drivers are treated well and they get the wage that they deserve.
Is there anything that you're going to be stockpiling before Christmas?
I'm hesitant to say anything on that front because we store it with the petrol and with loo rolls, so that what you end up with is, a politician or media says, "Oh, be careful on X," and all of a sudden they leave the shelves and everyone goes, "Oh yeah, there is a shortage." So I would say, buy as you normally do. Don't panic buy. Don't buy too early if you don't need to, and just take it easy and look forward to a fun Christmas.
That is a real dilemma. I have to tell you, when all the first fuel shortages story came on, I was really concerned that we were kind of fueling that story, because you mention it and immediately, because people remember 20 years ago, and they immediately then go and fill up their car because if they've heard it on the radio, so it must be true. We did the thing on toys earlier on the news hour, and again I kept saying, well, of course we're not encouraging people to do this, but you can't win, because if it's in the news, you have to cover it. He says, being very defensive. It's 8:22.
This is LBC. Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC. Text 84850.
It's 8:25 on LBC. If only you could have heard that discussion that we just had. Probably best not, though. 0345 6060 973 if you'd like to ask our panel a question. We have the Conservative MP Dean Russell on the panel, Oz Katerji, Middle East conflict journalist, Jonathan Liss, political commentator, and Annabel Denham from the Institute of Economic Affairs. Let's go to... No, it's another text from Bruce in Hull. 2 more energy companies have gone to the wall today. Should the government do more to intervene? Now, the EU have come up with some proposals that they've sent to member states, urging more state aid and 1 or 2 other things, which I think most countries are considering or doing anyway. Annabel, what do you think government should do in this situation? Because you're from a free market think tank, but are there not occasions when the government does have to step in, looking to the long term rather than just the short term?
The issue I have with this, Ian, is that the major problem we have in our energy market at the moment is a consequence of years and years of massive over-interference by the government, to the point where Dieter Helm, the energy expert, said actually no single individual is able to even understand it. It's a bit like the NHS. No single individual seems to be able to grasp
the modern
its
day
scale.
Schleswig-Holstein question. 3 people understand it and 2 of them are dead.
So I think this, that has made us extremely vulnerable to seasonal factors, and that's led to reliance on gas. We've got a government that's fixated on net zero, which undermines the affordability and security of supply in our energy system. But at the same time, we have these subsidies, we have the energy price cap, and so it's got this very confused policy with oft conflicting objectives, and it's left our energy market as an unholy mess. So I feel pretty trepidatious about the government stepping in to bail out companies, to issue loans to businesses which may be unviable, to fix a problem that is of the government's own making.
Oz.
Yeah, I've come at this from a different position, from taking a more free market position in the past to now, thinking that Corbyn may have had a thing or two to say about this that was actually quite correct. I think nationalisation is a very real, feasible way of dealing with this issue. I mean, the issue is, can the government be trusted to run an energy company? I don't know if this government could be trusted to run pee up in a brewery, but at the end of the day, we can't afford to let energy companies collapse and then leave people without vital services.
The nationalisation point is an interesting one, because if we think back to the early 1990s when all the energy companies were privatised, big part of the reason for that was that the state, the taxpayer, didn't have the money to invest for the future. Yeah. So it was thought that bring in the private sector and you will get the investment. And that happened in water, railways as well. Now, you can make an argument that none of those privatisations has worked particularly well, but the investment has come in.
Sure. At the end of the day, I think it's the sort of what it means for the consumer. What I worry, my fear of nationalisation, is that the government runs a company into the ground and then the public picks up but look, if the public are going to pick up the tab anyway to bail out energy companies, then we might as well take them into public control. I don't think that public ownership of state facilities, state services, is this massive left-wing thing. I think it works very well within a capitalist society, a capitalist economy, as long as it's done right. It's about the competence of the people in charge, and that's the part I have a problem with. So, I'd quite like to see this government ousted, no offence, and some competent people brought in to do something like that and to nationalise the energy companies. And, hopefully it doesn't. I could be wrong about that. I was wrong about thinking the free market would work for them. They've collapsed anyway. So,
Go on, Annabel, you want to come back?
Well, it's just that it wasn't a free market. It was a free market for about a night, and then the government started interfering in the market.
But we don't have a completely...
led to a lot of the problems that we have at the moment. In 2017, free marketeers were urging the government not to implement an energy price cap, but the government did it anyway, and that is, partly to blame from the fact that now energy companies are disincentivised from taking on new customers.
Isn't part of the problem, though, that Ofgem, the regulator, has got no teeth at all, and it's completely failed as a regulator?
Yes, I think that there are serious questions to be asked over Ofgem's competence. And of course, the way that it's looked at energy prices means that it hasn't really forecast the problems that we're going to see, if not this winter, then in early spring. So it's prevented companies and individuals from being able to prepare for the winter of discontent ahead.
Dean Russell, it's been a pretty unedifying week for the government in this area, with the Chancellor basically the Treasury calling the Business Secretary a liar. Do you not think that they should have got their act together in actually having a uniform message here, rather than coming across as, just not one hand not knowing what the other's doing?
Well, I think it's been quite fast moving, isn't it? I mean, I think from what I understand, they are working together now, trying to get the best solution moving forward. And I think, the idea of nationalisation, I'm always fearful of that, not just because I'm a Conservative, but I just think, the idea that you don't want to trust business or big business to run things, but somehow the government's going to have all the answers, and the state is suddenly going to be able to solve all the problems. For me, it always feels like it sounds probably perfect on paper, but actually the reality is always very different. So I think
the outcome is the same. If the companies fold and you step in, the outcome is the same, right? Surely.
Not really, because there's a difference between taking it over fully and doing all the mechanics, all the machinery of delivering. Actually, I think the idea of the government coming in and supporting and helping those organisations in a difficult time to get it right is important. But I think the idea of a government suddenly taking back state control, I think is for me, I don't feel is the right way. And also the cost of that to the British taxpayer at the moment would be huge. The logistics of that would be immense, and actually would take probably years to even do. So I think it's important that we get this sorted now. But absolutely looking forward, we need to make sure we've got the right process in place. And I know from what I've heard, at least, is that the Secretary of State and the Chancellor are working together to get the right solution.
Jonathan, hold your horses, because we have to go to the news before we get your contribution on this. I've let time run away, very bad chairmanship on my part, but we'll come to you in just a second. Keep your calls coming, 0345 6060 973. It's 8:32. Dominic Ellis has the news headlines.
The EU says its proposals to cut red tape on Irish Sea trade will mark the home stretch to solving the row over the Northern Ireland Protocol. The Commission's Vice President unveiled measures that would reduce checks on goods coming into the region by as much as 80%. The government has insisted a backlog of cargo at UK ports won't stop people getting hold of Christmas gifts. One shipping giant, Maersk, is diverting some of its containers away from the port in Felixstowe. The backlog is being blamed on a shortage of HGV drivers. And Labour has called for the Leicester East MP Claudia Webb to resign after she was found guilty of harassing a friend of her partner's. Miss Webb currently sits as an independent after being already suspended by Labour. The 56-year-old was accused of making a string of threatening calls to Michelle Merritt between 2018 and April last year. And the weather, cloudy with some clear spells across eastern and southern parts of the UK. Rain at times over hills in the north and the west. Lows of 10 degrees.
This is LBC.
The
Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC.
8:36, you're listening to or watching Cross Question with me, Iain Dale. Dean Russell, MP for Watford, is here. Katerji, Middle East conflict journalist. Jonathan Liss, political commentator, and Annabel Denham from the IEA. Now, we were just in the middle of answering a question from Bruce in Hull. He says 2 more energy companies have gone to the wall today. Should the government do more to intervene? We have yet to hear from Jonathan Liss. We're going to put that right now.
Well, I agree with what Oz was saying about nationalising. I have no problem at all with nationalising public services, and as has been pointed out, the government is effectively the owner of last resort anyway, because when these companies go to the wall, the government has to step in. But really, I think that we should be focusing more on how we help individual people rather than sort of gas companies. And the first thing the government could do, because I think that was a question about what the government can do, is to reverse the cut to universal credit. Because, if you're taking £1,000 away from the poorest people in Britain, while at the same time their energy prices are going through the roof, people are going to have a real dilemma this winter about whether they heat or eat. I think that is one thing the government can do very, very simply without going through years of nationalising, although I do think they should do that afterwards.
OK, thank you very much. Let's go to our next caller. It's David in Belfast. David, hi, what would you like to ask?
Well, evening, Iain. Just following Boris's Brexit betrayal over the Northern Ireland Protocol, I'd like to ask the panel which part of the mainland should unionists like me, 1 million of us, find to settle in rather than be forced into the Republic of Ireland, which seems to be where Boris wants to put us.
Well, so you think that the reunification of Ireland could be a distinct result of what's going on at the moment?
You bet it is. It's the plan that the Irish had in hatching the Northern Ireland Protocol. It's reunification by the back door, but made very accessible, regrettably, by our Prime Minister.
Well, there's a lot.
The British the British here, we're facing the biggest challenge in our lifetime. We no longer live in the United Kingdom today. We've been put into some kind of satellite offshoot of the EU. That's who's going to make our rules. That's the courts that we're going to have to be answerable to. And that's who's going to dictate who we do business with.
Right, let's go to our panel. Dean Russell, David obviously feels betrayed by what he calls the Boris Brexit betrayal.
Yeah, and I'm sorry he feels like that, but I genuinely don't believe that's the reality or the intention. I think the Northern Ireland situation as we see it at the moment is there's a lot of discussion at the moment. I saw some news just earlier today that the EU are putting forward some new plans around the protocol. I feel personally very, very proud to be a unionist in terms of I believe in all parts of the UK, and I think what we need to make sure that we're doing is looking at a practical solution that works for the UK, for British and Northern Ireland citizens, but also where the EU can get on board with it. But I do think we need to make sure that we're very firm in what we're expecting and make sure the Good Friday Agreement stays intact in that way. And I think what we've seen this past few months is a lot of rhetoric, but even today we've seen some news of movement from the EU, and I think we need to make sure we keep pushing in the right direction so we get that right, and so that gentlemen like your caller don't feel like they're a separate part from the rest of the UK, because
they are a separate part from the rest of the UK, aren't they? Because there's now a sea border between Great Britain and Northern Ireland, which Boris Johnson said would happen over his dead body. So you can understand why David feels betrayed.
Well, that's why I know with Lord Frost, he's been speaking a lot in the past few days about this and making sure that we revisit that protocol, make sure we get it right.
But
and make sure
he was the one that negotiated that protocol. It was supposed to be a brilliant deal for Northern Ireland and indeed for the rest of the UK. But it seems from what Dominic Cummings has said today that they signed it knowing full well that they would ditch it when the going got tough. Now, that's no way to run a government, is it?
Well, it depends whether you believe Dominic Cummings, I suppose, on that particular point. But I do think what we're seeing now is lots of debate and lots of discussion, but also some movement. And the EU just today, I think they've said that they want to remove 80% of spot checks on products. So I think we're going in the right direction, but we've got to be very firm on it and make sure that everybody within the UK feels like UK citizens, and we keep that moving forward. That very important part of unionism that I feel very much is part of who we are as our identity across Northern Ireland, Scotland, Wales and England.
Jonathan Liss, we've been talking about this subject for the last 5 years on and off, so let's not go into all the history too much. But today, as we sit here today, where the European Union has made their proposals, the British government put forward its command paper in July on this issue, do you feel optimistic that there will be an agreement now, or do you think that the British government is actually introducing things like, well, they did it in July, saying that the ECJ shouldn't have jurisdiction over this, and that will in the end be the sticking point?
Well, if I was a cynic, I would say that the government is deliberately stoking...
Just as well you're not, isn't it?
Just as well I'm not, but if I was a realist, I'd also say it, which the government is deliberately stoking conflict. And
Do you genuinely believe that?
I do believe it. I believe that the government thinks it's in its own political interests to have a permanent war with the European Union because it has no other ideas. It has nothing to say about the quality of people's lives. So it has only the culture war and the greatest hits, one of which is obviously Brexit. And now there's obviously a risk in that for the government because Get Brexit Done was based on the Northern Ireland Protocol being agreed in 2019, which was the base of the oven-ready deal. Now, after Dominic Cummings' revelations, which, let's face it, we were all saying at the time as well, many of us, either the government didn't know what it signed up to, or it was signing up to it in bad faith. But now it seems quite clear that they knew full well what they were signing up to, and they were defrauding the electorate based on that premise to get Brexit done with the oven-ready deal, only to shred it afterwards because it plays well with the right-wing tabloids and broadsheets. And look, I wish it wasn't the case. I hope there'll be something.
But are the proposals that the EU put forward today a basis for discussion?
Absolutely, they are. Look, the EU has been very, very reasonable. Obviously, there are problems with the GBNI and there are clearly situations where that can be de-dramatised. So, I think that Remainers don't want there to be problems here. I don't think Remainers would be only too happy if there was some kind of solution that would be happy to all sides. So, of course, in some situations like having medicines going from GB to NI, no one could have a problem with that. If there are things desperate for Northern Ireland, but that's why they are coming to the table. They are negotiating. What I fear is that the UK government is just trying to goad them. They want the EU to say no so they can generate a whole row. So they just bank what the EU offers and then ask for more. So, the ECJ is a totally ludicrous idea. If the UK... No, I'm sorry, Iain. If the UK government was so adamant that the ECJ should have no oversight over the Northern Ireland Protocol, they should not have agreed to the Northern Ireland Protocol.
I completely accept
that. That is a fundamental
But there is a compromise there, isn't there? Because the deal that the EU has with Switzerland, there is an intermediate arbitration stage before it goes to the ECJ, so there ought to be some room
Well, okay, fine, but the ECJ still has a role, and obviously Switzerland has a very different agreement. It involves free movement of people, for example, and the EU has been adamant from 2016 that it would not negotiate Brexit on the same basis as Switzerland because it hated that.
Right.
But the point is that if the UK wanted Switzerland, it should negotiate Switzerland. It agreed to what we have now.
Oz?
Yeah, I don't want to hit over the same points that you've raised. Lots of this is constitutional stuff, lots of this stuff in the air, lots of this is stuff that can be worked out. But I think what David from Belfast is really concerned about is the future of what he considers his nation. And the state of it and where it's heading towards philosophically and politically. And I think that, if you look back over the very recent history, Britain's membership of the EU wasn't a huge public issue in 2012 or 2011. It wasn't the Tory party, but you saw from the polling, as soon as it became an issue that we were going to go to a referendum, suddenly it was not only... it wasn't just a fantasy idea pushed by the political right. It was suddenly an idea that lots of people, in fact, the majority of voters, thought was a good idea and we should go for it. So I think that there is a real possibility that there is a reunification of Ireland, that there is an independent Scotland, that these are things that might happen in our future. And I think that the Conservative Party bears a lot of responsibility for, lots of these things were decisions the Conservative Party made. As Jonathan correctly pointed out, they signed up to everything they've done right now. And if they've made life more difficult for them, and they've done it because they swindled the electorate, essentially, by promising them one thing and giving them another, which everyone said was what they were doing. And then we were called that we was Project Fear or Ramonas or, at the end of the day, there is a big philosophical question coming for Ireland now, and it's a question for the Irish people, not just in Northern Ireland, but the wider in the Republic of Ireland too. This is a question that they have a right to be asked and to answer, and I think this is. I don't know if there are any easy answers. I don't think Brexit has solved anything. I think it's opened up totally new questions, and I think we're only beginning to see the impacts of what those answers might be down the line.
Annabel, if I could ask you to be quite concise on this.
Yes, of course. Concisely, I think that Oz and Jonathan are being quite negative on a day that has seen movement. Yes, there will still be checks, but there will be fewer checks. I think that people are now taking Lord Frost seriously. They said that the Northern Ireland Protocol was done and that we needed to deal with it, but he's managed to reopen negotiations. The EU is budging, which people did not believe it would. I would like to see us move towards the solution that was set out by Lord Frost in the Caban paper in July. It's a pragmatic and liberalising solution, and that the same cannot be said of the Northern Ireland Protocol. But I think a dose of optimism and perhaps, looking forward to the future rather than focusing on the past and battles fought over the last 5 years is needed.
Great stuff. We'll take more of your calls in a moment. 0345 606. Sorry?
No, I thought you'd missed 1%, but no.
I'm not that incompetent. Actually, I did do that last week. Somebody. It's 8:48.
LBC. Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Weekday mornings from 7.
There is a Christmas shortage on the way. Industry bosses are warning. Conservative MP and chair of the Conservative Party, Oliver Dowden.
The big challenge we have that you'll be familiar with is the lack of HGV drivers.
How many overseas drivers have we been able to attract?
I think we've had about 300 applications.
300 odd applications. How many approved?
Just over 20.
I'm so sorry. I thought you said that was I must have misheard you. I thought you said that it was been streamlined. That's roughly a 7% success rate.
But I expect that number to increase over time.
So that is
different.
Well, the
7% of those.
Mr. Dale.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Back tomorrow morning from 7. Listen on your radio and on Global Player. LBC. Britain's conversation. Cross Question with Iain Dale. Tweet at LBC.
8:52. Now, if you haven't had enough chatter about the Northern Ireland Protocol, we're going to be doing a whole hour on it after 9, so do stay tuned for that. And I particularly want to hear from people in Northern Ireland on that. 0345 6060 973. Right, let's go to our next caller. It's Chris in Stubbington. Hello, Chris.
Hello, Ian. Hello, Ian.
Hi.
Hi. I was wondering, does the panel think that Sadiq Khan was right to cancel this year's New Year's Eve fireworks, or is he a spoil sport?
Well, it's been announced today that the New Year's fireworks around the London Eye will not be happening. Normally about 100,000 people pack both sides of the Thames, but that's not going to be happening this year. It is because of COVID uncertainties, and I suppose none of us know what the situation will be like at the end of December. I suppose they're doing it under the precautionary principle. So, is he right to cancel the fireworks, or is he a spoil sport, asks Chris. Annabel.
I think he's perhaps a bit of both. As you say, there's a lot of uncertainty over what's going to happen in the coming months, though I do feel reasonably confident that we're not going to have some enormous spike in COVID deaths over the winter months. Obviously, the London fireworks come with a cost. Perhaps he's concerned that will not be reflected in the number of people who show up. But again, it's a flagship event for London, for the London Mayor. So I think, people will be disappointed that he's not proceeding with it.
And I suppose they would have to make that decision now, because you can't just make fireworks in 5 days before New Year's, I guess. Oz?
Yeah, I have sympathy with Sadiq Khan with this, because I don't think this would have been an easy decision for him, and there are very few events that really that the mayor gets to kind of have put on a show for people, especially in the last couple of years. I think it's something that we could probably all do with, but I think there are genuine health concerns, especially heading into winter. We could not just see a spike of, COVID, but other flu-related illnesses and so on that could in the current place that we're in, I can understand the reasons for caution. I will say, though, on another point, is that I think fireworks are rubbish. I think they scare animals. PTSD survivors generally hate them. If you've been in a war zone, fireworks are really no fun to be around. And I feel no sadness whatsoever that this has been cancelled. I'm perfectly happy to say it, but this is why I'm raising it, because my perspective is it's crap. I don't really care anyway. So
it's quite spectacular to watch, though.
It might well be, but from a personal perspective, I don't feel a great loss that it's gone. Because the more cautious side of me saying for COVID, yeah, fair enough. But spoil sport, it's not spoiling my fun. But I feel sympathetic to the Mayor of London, but given what's happened in the last couple of years, maybe wait till next year to push the boat out.
I have sympathy with what both the other panellists have said. I think that obviously you need to make decisions. We don't know what's going to happen this winter with COVID. But on the other hand, at the moment, Britain is open. That seems to be being managed to what most people think is an acceptable level, although obviously cases and deaths are still far too high. But I don't think it would have been a terrible decision to proceed with them. And if there was obviously going to be a lockdown, worse things in the world have happened than having to cancel a fireworks display at short notice. So I kind of think that on balance, I would have made a different decision.
Is my memory playing tricks on me? But I'm sure there was a firework display last year. It's just that people couldn't go and watch
weren't
it.
allowed to go. Yeah, I think
I don't know whether they're going to do that again.
Major Tom, he was in lights.
Yeah. Now, Dean, how does one celebrate New Year in Watford?
You know what? I'm at that age now where it's a mug of hot chocolate and watching the Big Ben on the TV at night. But I think for most people, we go to Canterbury Park or one of the fantastic Watford sites to have fantastic fireworks. So it's always a good occasion to give a plug to my fantastic constituency. But I think for London, it's a shame because it's such an iconic thing, isn't it? The fireworks over the London Eye. But I do think we have to be cautious still as we come out of COVID. But I think it would have been quite nice. I hope there's some fireworks, and it would have been nice to perhaps more socially distanced invites so that it doesn't get as crammed as it normally does every year. But I'd love to see the reasoning why it was cancelled. But if it was for medical grounds, as it were, and scientific grounds, then fair enough. But I think it'd be a shame to not have some fireworks over the London Eye this year.
Right, our final text question at the end of the programme. Jacob in Liverpool says, Robert Webb has sadly had to pull out of Strictly. Who should replace him, and why should it be Iain Dale? Tumbleweed goes across the studio.
I'll go with that. I'd love to see you dance, Ian, but if
are you going to dance with me?
Listen,
I'd dance with you.
I would dance with you.
So I'm getting offers from everywhere. I noticed Dean is remaining silent.
Dean would happy to dance with you too, I'm sure. I think David Mitchell should replace Robert Webb. I mean, they come as a twosome anyway, and he definitely can't dance. I mean, no offence, David, if you're listening, but you don't look like a dancer, so I'd love to see that.
I think it should be Andrew Neil as his prize for re-entering
brilliant.
society after his GB News humiliation.
No offence, Andrew, if you're listening either, but please do consider it. I would definitely watch that.
Having never watched an episode of Strictly,
well done, you.
Thank you. Is it more entertaining if the contestants are terrible dancers or brilliant dancers?
I refer that answer to Jackie Smith or Anne Widdecombe. She's going to kill me for bracketing her with Anne Widdecombe, isn't she?
Are you a good dancer, Ian?
Am I a good dancer?
Yeah.
What do you think?
Oh, I don't know. We'll have to find out and film it, won't we?
No, we really will not. It won't be happening. That is, there are one or two of those programmes that I'd quite like to do, but Strictly is not one of them. I was vaguely approached to do Dancing on Ice, can you believe?
That's way more dangerous.
But right? I can actually ice skate, or I could.
Break your nose with Dancing on Ice.
It's not going to happen, is it? Anyway, what a way to end the programme. Thank you very much indeed to all of our panel. Dean Russell, Oz Katerji, my producer is shouting. What are you shouting in my ear? I did ask Dean, didn't I? Dean, didn't I ask you about Strictly?
Ian, it'd have to be you all the way. I think you could do a delightful tango, as you do with your guests. So I think that'd be fantastic on Strictly.
Well, what a
gay partnership.
What a foursome we could make.
A gay partnership. Exactly. Ian with a all male lineup.
That's not going to happen. Not going to happen. However much you tempt me.
We want to see that. Go on, producers.
Oz Katerji, Dean Russell, Annabel Denham and Jonathan List, thank you very much indeed. We are going to continue our discussion on the Northern Ireland Protocol in just a moment. What do you think should happen now? What should the British government's reaction be to the EU proposals? Do they go far enough? Are you are you surprised by what the EU has said today? Because I must admit they've gone a little bit further than I thought they might, but they probably haven't gone as far as Lord Frost thinks they should. Are we heading for some sort of compromise or some sort of standoff? Because that's what normally happens in these situations, isn't it? And then it's all sorted out right at the last minute. Do you think that's going to happen now? Really want to hear from you if you are from Northern Ireland, to get your perspective, because I think we can learn a lot from you all. 0345 6060 973.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play.